A narco submarine packed with cocaine drifted dangerously close to a United States Navy destroyer armed for war. What followed was the deadliest anti-drug operation ever recorded, shattering a billion-dollar empire in just 72 hours. But how could a crude jungle-built vessel even stand a chance against cutting-edge naval power? And what secret weapons did the Navy unleash to crush these ghost subs once and for all? Join us as we find out how much of a mistake it will be when a narco submarine gets too close to the United States Navy destroyer. Three traffickers made the gravest mistake in narco submarine history when their handmade vessel drifted too close to the USS James, a 418-foot warship built for battle, not mercy. The James wasn't just another patrol ship. It carried state-of-the-art detection systems, 57mm deck guns, and helicopters armed for combat. The drug runners had wandered straight into a trap they could never escape. The submarine barely broke the Pacific surface, rising only 3 feet above the waves. A shipment of Colombian cocaine, weighing 5 tons and valued at approximately $500 million, was being transported towards the United States via a diesel-powered vessel emitting black smoke. The craft, built in a jungle hideout from fiberglass and timber, was designed to hide from patrols. Against small boats and aircraft, its low profile worked. Against a Navy destroyer, it was useless. On the James, Captain Thomas Rodzowicz studied the radar screen. The submarine's heat signature glowed clear as day. The Navy's thermal imaging systems were built to track warships across oceans. A homemade drug sub didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, his crew had the vessel's location, speed, and even its estimated cargo weight based on how deep it sat in the water. The traffickers realized too late what they had stumbled into. The thunder of helicopter rotors broke the silence. From the destroyer's flight deck, Navy helicopters armed with advanced targeting systems took to the sky. These weren't drug enforcement pilots. They were trained for war. Panic set in. The sub could barely make 12 knots at full throttle, while the destroyer could cut through the ocean at 30. With 40,000 horsepower driving its twin engines, the Navy ship turned what might have been a chase into a slaughter. The traffickers made their next mistake. They tried to dump the evidence. One after another, cocaine bales splashed into the Pacific, nearly 6,000 pounds of pure product worth $300 million. But the James documented everything, filming and marking GPS coordinates of every package. Instead of erasing evidence, the crew had just added more charges to their fate. In desperation, they reached for the scuttle plug, the last resort for crews like theirs. Flood the vessel, sink it fast, and take the drugs to the bottom with it. Better the ocean floor than a United States courtroom, but the Navy was faster. Rigid inflatable boats launched from the destroyer's stern, carrying boarding teams trained for hostile seizures. Within 15 minutes, the traffickers were dragged from their sinking sub, surrounded and subdued by armed sailors. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Federal prosecutors hit them with charges of international trafficking, conspiracy to distribute cocaine, and operating an unregistered vessel. Each carried decades of prison time. Their submarine was towed, studied, and then destroyed with controlled fire from the James itself. By the time the destroyer returned to port, the lesson was clear. No cartel craft, no matter how hidden or clever, can survive a direct encounter with United States naval power. The three men lost their freedom, their cargo, and any chance of return. They had challenged a war machine, and the war machine answered. That single encounter was only the spark. What followed became one of the most devastating anti-narcotics operations in modern naval history. In just 72 hours, a single United States destroyer dismantled a trafficking network worth more than $1 billion. The question remains, how does one warship take down an empire? Captain Thomas Rodzowicz commanded the USS James when intelligence officers gave the mission its unforgettable name, the Pacific Cocaine Massacre. His destroyer, armed with advanced surveillance and a specialized strike team, neutralized 6 high-speed smuggling boats and 1 narco submarine. Together, the vessels carried 24,000 pounds of cocaine, cargo valued at over $1 billion once it hit American streets. The operation unfolded with brutal efficiency off the coast of Ecuador. From the moment the destroyer's radar screens lit up, the scale of the traffickers' plan became clear. Across hundreds of square miles of ocean, The radar tracked multiple vessels, speedboats loaded with 2 to 3 tons of cocaine each, and a semi-submersible submarine carrying another 5 tons. The cartels had coordinated their fleet to overwhelm routine patrols, never expecting to encounter a full-scale naval destroyer. The first strikes came from above helicopters lifted off from the deck of the James, flown by pilots trained for battle rather than routine patrols. Their aircraft carried advanced targeting gear and mounted weapons built for hostile seas. Within minutes, the smugglers learned speed was no match for military precision. What started as a chase quickly turned into a demonstration of overwhelming power and control. The submarine, however, posed a tougher challenge. 300 miles off the Galapagos, the low-slung vessel tried to vanish beneath the waves as rotors thundered overhead. But it could only manage 12 knots at top speed, while the James pushed 30 without strain. Its twin diesel engines, producing 40,000 horsepower, made pursuit less of a chase and more of a hunt. The Navy wasn't working alone. Maritime patrol planes swept into the operation, casting a wide net of surveillance across the ocean. From the air, crews tracked several vessels at once, picking up the heat of their engines and even gauging how heavily they were loaded by how deeply they rode in the water. Each update was sent straight to the destroyer, allowing the Navy to close in with precision. The traffickers, realizing the trap was tightening, answered with desperation. One speedboat dumped bale after bale into the Pacific, 6,000 pounds of cocaine scattering across the waves nearly 200 miles offshore. The James stayed locked in pursuit for 60 miles, while other naval crews worked to recover the floating cargo with nets and cranes. Every package became another piece of evidence and another nail in the traffickers' case. Boarding operations followed. From the destroyer's stern, rigid inflatable boats launched with specialist boarding teams. These weren't Coast Guard inspectors. They were sailors trained for combat. They closed in, overwhelmed resistance, and subdued crews within minutes. Against that kind of force, there was no contest. When investigators pulled the threads together, the scale of the operation stunned even seasoned intelligence officers. The vessels were tied directly to the Sinaloa cartel, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, and Colombia's Clan del Golfo. These weren't small-time smugglers. This was a coordinated billion-dollar network stretching across countries, an empire on the water. Each stage of gathering evidence was handled with care and precision. Crews photographed vessels, cataloged cocaine bales, logged GPS points, and transmitted intelligence back to Washington and international law enforcement in real time. Nothing was left to chance. When the evidence was secured, destruction began. Naval gunners opened fire with 57mm deck guns, tearing through wooden speedboats until they were nothing but wreckage. The submarine's fiberglass hull was obliterated by controlled charges. One by one, the cartel's fleet was reduced to smoldering debris sinking into the Pacific. The 72-hour blitz sent shockwaves through the underworld. Cartel bosses who thought they had perfected stealth watched as a billion-dollar operation crumbled in less than 3 days. The message was clear. Against United States naval power, even the largest trafficking empire is nothing more than a target. The wrecked vessels are only a glimpse of something far more sinister beneath the surface. These crude submarines are so dangerous that their own crews call them by a chilling name: the coffins. The word isn't an exaggeration. Built mostly from wood and fiberglass, these boats kill almost as often as law enforcement does. At 50 feet long, they can carry up to 10 tons of cocaine, yet ride so low in the Pacific that waves are constantly breaking over the hull. Inside, the crew has less room than a bedroom closet. 3 or 4 men are packed in tight, forced to endure weeks at sea in conditions that push most people to the edge within days. From 2019 to 2023, Colombian forces discovered 39 of these homemade submarines tucked away in secret jungle shipyards. Each one is designed with a fatal feature: a scuttle plug. Crews can pull it to flood the vessel and sink everything: cargo, evidence, and sometimes themselves. It's meant as an escape from capture, but in practice it doubles as a death sentence. Every part of the engineering puts cocaine ahead of human life. Diesel engines pump exhaust straight into the cramped compartments, poisoning the air the men breathe. In 2023, Colombian naval forces boarded a drifting submarine and found 2 crewmen slumped dead at the controls, killed by fumes, while the autopilot kept steering 5 tons of cocaine toward the United States coast. The materials tell the same story of compromise. The thin fiberglass and wood hull, often no more than 2 inches thick, is designed to slip under radar, not to withstand the ocean. Rough seas batter the low decks, sending waves into the living quarters where salt water mixes with diesel fumes to create a toxic haze. Navigation is equally primitive. Crews steer with basic GPS units and manual controls that demand constant attention. There is no chance to rotate shifts for sleep. Men stay awake for days on end, combining exhaustion with chemical poisoning until breakdowns and hallucinations become inevitable. At the high end, some cartels spend up to $4 million on submarines that can dive 30 feet below the surface. These advanced models carry ballast tanks, hydroplanes, and lead shielding to hide from thermal sensors. No one has ever caught one of these fully submersible versions in open waters. They remain the most elusive and dangerous tools in the smuggler's arsenal. But across all models, the death toll rivals that of battlefields. In February 2025, traffickers pulled the scuttle plug during a boarding attempt by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. The flooding mechanism killed not only the suspect's evidence, but also a law enforcement officer who was still inside the boat. Even the weaknesses that help navies track these vessels turn against the men inside. The same heat signatures that expose them to thermal detection also burn beneath the crew compartments, pumping deadly fumes directly into their lungs. Survival gear is almost non-existent. The men bring only the bare minimum of food and water, enough for the trip if everything goes as planned. There are no reserves for breakdowns or delays. Radios and emergency beacons are usually left behind, since a single signal could expose their location. That silence leaves the crews alone with the sea, trapped inside what is essentially a coffin drifting toward its destination. And still, the demand for cocaine keeps these vessels in production. Each successful run convinces more men to take the risk, climbing aboard submarines built not just to move drugs, but to claim lives. Regional submarine runs were dangerous enough, but everything changed once traffickers realized their so-called coffins could cross entire oceans. How did crude wooden boats, pieced together in jungle workshops, suddenly become a threat to ports on the other side of the world? The turning point came in 2019, when European authorities discovered a 72-foot Narco submarine that had washed ashore in Galicia, Spain. Against every expectation, the vessel had crossed the Atlantic from South America, hauling tons of cocaine undetected through some of the most closely watched waters on Earth. The voyage spanned more than 4,000 miles and proved what intelligence agencies had long feared. These submarines could reach almost anywhere. That first crossing opened the floodgates. Since then, at least a dozen more subs have attempted intercontinental runs to supply European and Australian markets. 8 of those attempts happened in just the past 2 years, showing how quickly cartels have scaled up their global operations. One vessel's trip revealed just how far the traffickers had refined their methods. It moved more than 1,200 kilometers along the Amazon River before reaching the Atlantic, a journey that demanded skilled navigation and careful control of fuel supplies. Unlike the rough, improvised boats built in Colombia's coastal jungles, this sub had been constructed in a Brazilian yard near Manaus, with techniques better suited for long-distance voyages. Interceptions tell part of the story. Authorities have stopped subs carrying 6.5 tons of cocaine near the Azores, found abandoned hulls washed up in Sierra Leone, and even seized Pacific crossers aimed at Australia with 5-ton payloads. Yet every bust is also a reminder that countless other runs likely slipped through unseen. Shipyards are no longer limited to Colombia. Police and military units have found submarine workshops in Brazil, Venezuela, Guyana, and Suriname, proof that the trade has pushed well beyond its original stronghold. These newer facilities specialize in boats meant for open ocean crossings rather than short coastal runs. Camouflage has become an art form. Subs intended for the Pacific are painted in pale greens and teals to blend with tropical waters, while Atlantic boats are finished in storm gray or dark blue to disappear into rough northern seas. Such attention to detail underscores how professional these criminal operations have become. Support networks at sea keep the system running. Fishing boats posing as legitimate vessels act as mobile refueling stations, meeting submarines in international waters to top off their tanks. A standard sub carries about 1,350 gallons of fuel, enough for long legs of the trip, but not an entire ocean without resupply. These covert refueling rendezvous take place far from the eyes of maritime patrols. Technology has also advanced. Some modern designs include Narco torpedo systems, steel containers packed with up to 5 tons of cocaine, dragged 200 meters behind a boat. If law enforcement closes in, the torpedo can be detached and sunk to 30 meters with a radio-controlled release, leaving the surface vessel looking clean. Later, the cargo can be retrieved by divers or GPS-guided recovery crews. Unexpected hotspots have emerged. Between 2017 and 2019, 5 subs beached themselves on Costa Rica's southern coast, turning stretches of tranquil shoreline into staging grounds for smuggling. For traffickers, the geography made it an ideal jumping-off point toward North America and Europe. The economics explain why the risks are worth it. A 5-ton load valued at $50 million in Colombia can fetch more than $200 million on European streets. Those margins justify multi-million-dollar builds, long ocean crossings, and the steady loss of crews who never make it back. Intelligence agencies track what they can with satellites and surveillance aircraft. But once a submarine vanishes into the open ocean, detection rates plummet. The sheer size of the sea offers natural cover, and the boats are designed to exploit exactly those gaps in patrol coverage. Today, the so-called cocaine navy is no longer a regional menace. With subs operating across the Atlantic and Pacific, these floating coffins now threaten maritime security in nearly every major shipping lane on Earth. The rise of transoceanic drug submarines has created a problem the world's navies were never built to handle, and it exposes a brutal truth about modern sea power. How can trillion-dollar militaries fail to stop wooden boats pieced together in jungle workshops? When General John Kelly, the former commander of United States Southern Command, testified before Congress, his words stunned lawmakers. When asked about America's ability to counter narco subs, he admitted he simply sat and watched it go by. Kelly's point was clear. Advanced warships, cutting-edge radar, and satellite surveillance mean little against the scale of the trade and the sheer size of the oceans. Internal assessments confirm the gap. United States forces are only able to pursue about a quarter of the drug subs they detect. That leaves nearly 3 out of 4 free to finish their voyages untouched. Once a vessel reaches the open sea, the odds are even worse. Interdiction drops to around 5%, meaning 95% of these runs succeed without anyone laying a hand on them. Colombia's Navy does better in rivers and estuaries, stopping some before they ever reach the ocean, but those account for only a fraction of the overall flow. The USS James illustrates both sides of this struggle. The destroyer spent 112 days scouring the eastern Pacific, armed with powerful deck guns, advanced radar, helicopters, and boarding teams. Over that deployment, the crew seized 48,000 pounds of cocaine and captured 34 traffickers across 11 separate busts. Yet analysts believe that haul represented less than 10% of what actually moved through the region in the same window. The United States Coast Guard faces the same reality. In January 2024 alone, its cutters pulled more than 24 tons of drugs from the Pacific. It was a victory worth noting, but intelligence officials estimate that dozens of similar runs went undetected at the same time, carrying billions of dollars in cocaine toward United States and European markets. Technology has not closed the gap. Surveillance planes can pick up engine heat signatures, measure displacement in the water, and pass targeting data to ships below. But those systems are designed for individual targets. When dozens of vessels scatter across thousands of square miles at once, even the best equipment becomes stretched thin. And while destroyers and cutters pack overwhelming firepower, guns that can turn a speedboat into splinters in seconds, explosives that can obliterate a submarine hull, their weapons only matter if the enemy can be found. Washington has tried to respond with tougher measures. Cartels have been branded as terrorist organizations, more military assets have been deployed to choke points, and new patrols have been ordered across key transit zones. But despite the extra muscle, the traffic hasn't slowed. If anything, it continues to grow. Every seized vessel follows a strict chain of evidence. Crews photograph everything, log GPS coordinates, and secure drug packages for prosecution before scuttling the craft with deck guns or demolition charges. The courts hand down long prison terms, decades in many cases. Still, the lure of cartel money keeps new crews coming, willing to trade their lives for a chance at fortune. This hidden war now stretches across every major ocean, a shadow fleet of homemade submarines slipping past some of the most sophisticated navies on Earth. The equation is simple but devastating. The oceans are too vast, the boats too many, and the profit too great. The United States Navy unleashed a weapon that has made drug cartels tremble in the Pacific. Hidden for years under top-secret programs, the laser system Helios strikes faster than any missile and costs mere dollars per shot. Could this technology finally turn the tide against billion-dollar smuggling networks? And what shocking footage reveals the true power of lasers at sea? Will the cartels ever recover? Join us as we find out what happens when the United States Navy's laser weapons go to battle against the cartels. The USS Preble was cutting through the Pacific in October 2024, carrying a weapon no warship had ever tested in real-world conditions. Buried under layers of secrecy sat the Navy's new high-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance system, known simply as Helios. This was not just another piece of military hardware. It was about to prove itself in action for the first time. Naval intelligence had been following strange activity near the California coast. Small, fast boats were moving drugs at night, and whenever Coast Guard cutters moved in, drones suddenly appeared overhead. These weren't amateurs trying their luck. Cartel groups had turned smuggling into coordinated military-style operations. Their speedboats could push past 60 miles an hour while carrying loads of cocaine worth more than $20 million. Meanwhile, the drones circling above provided real-time video to handlers on shore. The result was that the cartels always seemed one step ahead, making traditional interdictions nearly useless. That was about to change. With Helios on board, the Navy no longer had to waste $4.3 million Standard Missile-6 interceptors on drones that cost only a few $1,000s each. Instead, the laser system could fire at a cost of about $13 per shot. The weapon drew 120 kilowatts directly from the ship's own electrical system, removing the need to carry ammunition or resupply mid-mission. The way it works is both simple and extraordinary. Fiber optic cables generate separate beams of light that are combined into one powerful stream. This method, called spectral beam combining, produces temperatures hot enough to burn through a steel engine or set a drone's body ablaze in seconds. Unlike missiles or bullets that travel through the air, laser energy moves at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. Against cartel speedboats, this meant instant results. Many of the engines contained aluminum parts that vaporized under the heat. Crews often abandoned ship the moment they saw smoke rising from the stern. The drugs, however, stayed on board, making it easier for authorities to recover the evidence and cripple billion-dollar trafficking routes. The system tracks its targets through a mix of thermal sensors and radar. Unlike conventional weapons, it never runs out of ammunition. That made it particularly effective against the drone swarms the cartels had started using to overwhelm border patrols. What once required multiple ships and costly interceptors could now be handled in seconds by a single vessel equipped with Helios. There were limits, however. The weather along the Gulf Coast sometimes made things tricky. Heavy moisture in the air could scatter the beam, forcing operators to adjust power or wait for conditions to improve. Smugglers were quick to adapt, timing large-scale runs to coincide with storm seasons when laser weapons were less reliable. Even with these challenges, the Navy is already looking ahead. Plans are in motion to expand Helios to 300 kilowatts for use on future DDGX destroyers and next-generation frigates. Right now, only larger ships with advanced power systems can support the huge energy and cooling requirements. Smaller patrol boats, which would benefit greatly, simply don't have the infrastructure to carry the system yet. Helios is also linked to the Aegis combat system, giving ships layered defenses against both air and surface threats. Its optical dazzler offers another option. Instead of destroying a target, it can blind cameras and sensors. That allows intelligence officers to capture cartel data without losing the chance to analyze it. Military leaders see directed energy weapons like Helios as the next step in naval warfare. The cost advantage alone is significant, neutralizing cheap but numerous threats without draining budgets. More importantly, the system keeps crews safe and ensures the Navy maintains control over contested waters. The footage from that October mission remains under wraps, but the signal to cartels and other adversaries is unmistakable. While laser systems at sea reshaped how navies intercept smugglers and drones, the skies required an entirely different kind of breakthrough. The real question became, what happens when the world's most expensive bomber is paired with a weapon that costs less than a cup of coffee to fire? The Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit, better known as the stealth bomber, carries a staggering price tag of about $2.1 billion per aircraft. Every mission burns through hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel and support costs before the bomber even releases a single weapon. Conventional precision munitions only add to the expense. Air-to-ground missiles range anywhere from $100,000 to $4 million each. Military leaders started asking how long the United States could afford to fight drawn-out conflicts when opponents were fielding cheap drones and disposable hardware. That concern sparked a quiet but ambitious effort. Defense contractors began working laser technology into existing aircraft under classified upgrade programs. As part of its latest modernization, the B-2 Spirit received experimental laser pods designed to hit both ground targets and airborne threats. Instead of loading heavy racks of missiles or bombs, the system draws power directly from the plane's electrical generators. This cuts down payload weight and removes many of the limits imposed by conventional ordnance. The change in cost was staggering. Each laser shot came in at roughly $15. A bomber that once needed million-dollar cruise missiles to take out hardened targets could now destroy dozens for the cost of a single traditional warhead. For long campaigns against enemies with endless numbers but limited sophistication, the economics suddenly tilted sharply in America's favor. Adversaries, however, did not stand still. Many began deploying large swarms of cheap drones, launching them in the hundreds to overwhelm defenses. Conventional missile batteries quickly ran into a problem. Ammunition ran out fast, and each interceptor missile cost tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Analysts calculated that, over time, enemies could bleed American defenses dry simply by throwing waves of expendable machines into the fight. Laser weapons erase that problem. Because they rely only on power from the aircraft, they can fire continuously without running out of ammunition. As long as the generators keep producing electricity, the beam can keep firing. In practical terms, this gave bombers something close to unlimited ammunition. Nuclear-powered ships and advanced electrical grids provided even greater endurance for extended operations. The combination of the B-2's stealth and its new directed energy weapons created a tactical edge no adversary had faced before. Radar operators might detect the bright streak of a missile launch, but laser strikes left almost no trace, only a brief flash of heat when the target was hit. That meant bombers could destroy multiple threats without giving away their position to nearby defenses. There were limits, of course. Lasers are still shaped by the environment. Dust, moisture, and rain scatter the energy beam and reduce its reach. Mission planners now include detailed weather forecasts in their operational checklists. On clear nights with dry air, the system is at its most lethal. This shift has already begun to influence how money is spent. Budgets that once poured into producing mountains of ammunition are being redirected into developing higher output lasers and more powerful generators to sustain them. The focus is moving from stockpiling shells and missiles to investing in renewable energy systems that can keep weapons firing as long as the plane remains airborne. Bomber crews are also being retrained. Unlike traditional bombs, lasers don't explode on impact. They require steady, precise contact with a target for several seconds. Pilots now practice flying patterns that hold beams on moving objects, while operators train on power management to make sure the weapons never drain the system during intense engagements. The shift represents more than just new technology. Strategists see it as a change in how wars will be fought and financed. Victory in modern conflict depends not only on advanced weapons, but also on the ability to fight for months or years without exhausting resources. With the B-2 Spirit now carrying directed energy systems, the United States military has shown that it is preparing for that future, one where cost-effective firepower and technological superiority go hand in hand. In the Red Sea, Iranian-backed forces discovered a profitable new market when Mexican cartels offered cryptocurrency in exchange for modern weapons. The Houthis, already armed with drones, guided munitions, and electronic warfare systems, found eager buyers in organizations flush with cash from fentanyl sales. With billions generated annually through drug trafficking, cartels could afford battlefield-proven equipment that American law enforcement had never faced at home. The trade was managed through encrypted networks overseen by Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers in Yemen. Cartels supplied chemical precursors for explosives, while in return they received completed drones, radar jammers, and even anti-ship missiles. These deals bypassed black market arms dealers and avoided international sanctions designed to stop dangerous weapons from spreading to non-state actors. By early 2024, Houthis were attacking United States Navy destroyers in the Red Sea with kamikaze drones and cruise missiles. Within months, similar systems surfaced along the Texas border. Border Patrol agents began to encounter drone swarms flying in formation, copying the same tactics seen overseas against commercial shipping. What had once been fast boat smuggling runs evolved into militarized campaigns. Cartels now fielded drones with thermal cameras for surveillance, jammers to cut police radios, and even explosive-laden suicide drones used against rivals. This level of sophistication posed a crisis that ordinary policing could not contain. Iranian advisors deepened the threat by training cartel fighters directly. In camps hidden across Mexico and Central America, former Houthi drone operators taught everything from electronic warfare to coordinated strike tactics. These programs produced a new generation of cartel technicians who could build, maintain, and deploy weapons that rivaled those used in war zones. The network came to light when United States intelligence traced cryptocurrency movements, linking cartel accounts to Middle Eastern operators. Investigators matched payment schedules to known Houthi weapons purchases, proving that American drug demand was indirectly funding militants engaged in live combat with United States forces abroad. Soon, American police and border units began reporting weapons they had never seen outside of combat zones, night vision devices built for the battlefield, encrypted satellite communications, and armor-piercing ammunition. Local shootouts started to resemble clashes in foreign war zones, with gangs wielding tools meant to fight national militaries. Financial assessments confirmed the core problem. Cartels now commanded revenues greater than the defense budgets of many nations. With money on that scale, they could buy nearly any weapon on the global market. This economic power meant that criminal organizations inside the United States borders had the resources of a hostile state, turning a law enforcement challenge into a national security emergency. While Iranian weapons continued moving south through established channels, Mexican cartels were busy building something that caught intelligence agencies completely off guard. The pressing question became, what happens when criminal organizations begin producing military hardware faster than governments can track it? Using just the profits from a single fentanyl shipment valued at around $200 million, cartels set up underground aerospace manufacturing sites. These weren't makeshift workshops or hobbyist drone operations. They were full-scale facilities staffed with engineers who had once worked for legitimate defense contractors. Production lines inside disguised warehouses and abandoned mines were turning out as many as 50 advanced unmanned aerial vehicles every month, hidden from satellite detection by carefully built hangars and underground infrastructure. The Sinaloa cartel also managed to purchase 12 Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 drones, aircraft already proven on battlefields in Ukraine and Syria. Instead of mounting explosives, cartel technicians reconfigured the payload bays to carry up to 500 pounds of compressed fentanyl. A single flight could deliver enough narcotics to saturate the East Coast drug market for half a year. The cartel's surveillance capacity transformed almost overnight. Persistent drone patrols equipped with thermal sensors and secure communication links provided constant updates on Border Patrol movements, high-altitude balloon locations, and law enforcement patrol patterns. Coordinated formations used artificial intelligence software originally designed for military swarm tactics, giving cartels real-time command over wide stretches of the border. Materials science also became part of their playbook. Factories began producing airframes out of carbon fiber and other advanced composites, giving drones more speed and endurance compared to aluminum-bodied aircraft. Many suppliers who sold the raw materials assumed they were dealing with ordinary commercial buyers and never questioned the unusual order volumes. Quality standards inside these underground factories rivaled those found in legitimate aerospace production lines. Cartel ingenuity extended into the seas as well. Narco submarines, once crude vessels for smuggling, evolved into autonomous carriers able to launch aerial drones while submerged. This created layered surveillance networks that existing interdiction methods could not detect, much less disrupt. Each submarine carried as many as 20 small drones, each with the endurance to remain airborne for more than 8 hours. Electronic warfare soon entered the picture. During clashes with rivals and law enforcement, cartels began deploying jammers and radar spoofing equipment. These systems disrupted police communications and even interfered with civilian aviation networks during smuggling runs. Much of the hardware and training came directly from Iranian sources, with instructors operating from bases in Central America. Autonomy made the threat even more dangerous. New targeting systems allowed drones to identify and pursue vehicles or people without any human operator in control. Facial recognition programs and vehicle matching algorithms enabled aircraft to track targets across state lines for days at a time. Police suddenly faced flying weapons that behaved more like hunter-killer machines than surveillance tools. By the early 2010s, the global drone market was worth an estimated $42 billion, and cartels were a part of it. Through front companies, they poured money into universities, startups, and artificial intelligence firms. Many researchers never realized their civilian projects were being adapted for cartel weapons programs. With mass production, costs plunged. Each combat-ready drone could be built for under $10,000. That meant a single drug shipment worth $50 million could finance as many as 5,000 drones. This direct link between narcotics profits and weapons development created exponential growth in cartel military strength. For the United States military, few options remained. Conventional airstrikes against these hidden factories risked heavy civilian casualties in densely populated areas. Strategic bombers armed with precision lasers emerged as the only realistic counter. Unlike explosive munitions, directed energy weapons could destroy underground entrances, manufacturing equipment, and command centers with surgical accuracy, carrying out strikes inside the United States territory without triggering the kind of devastation that traditional weapons would cause. Cartel breakthroughs in drone technology grabbed headlines, but America's investment in laser weapons gave the United States a clear advantage. Unlike missiles or conventional guns, directed energy systems have a major edge. They perform best in the very conditions that smugglers depend on. In many ways, nature itself has become an ally for the United States' defense. Could the very skies the cartels rely on actually be working against them? By 2023, military planners had figured out how to use weather and air conditions to know when lasers would work best. Some people pointed out possible limits, but in fact, these conditions usually gave the United States an advantage over the cartels. Clear skies, low humidity, and stable temperatures, the most common conditions along key border areas, allow lasers to strike targets with pinpoint accuracy, almost instantly. The deserts of Arizona and New Mexico tell a similar story. Cartels counted on heat to shield their drones, but the clear desert air helps lasers travel unimpeded. With minimal moisture or clouds, targets can be disabled long before they cross into United States territory. In this setting, dry landscapes became a natural ally for defense forces. Altitude works similarly. The higher a drone flies, the thinner the air becomes, meaning there's less to block or scatter the laser beam. This allows military lasers to stay tightly focused, deliver more energy to their target, and hit with devastating precision. Ironically, cartel drones trying to escape by flying higher only made them more visible to United States sensors, making it easier for operators to track, target, and disable them. The weather could pose a challenge. Fog, dust, heavy storms, or sudden rain showers can scatter light and slightly reduce a laser's effectiveness. Yet the United States systems are built to handle these obstacles. Satellites and radar provide real-time tracking, while conventional interceptors back up the lasers when nature tries to interfere. On most days, clear skies, dry air, and stable temperatures give American defenses a natural advantage. By the end of the day, the cartel's massive investments in drones rarely paid off. Instead of shielding them, the atmosphere often magnified the effectiveness of the United States' lasers. Sunlight, desert air, and thin, high-altitude conditions became silent allies, turning the sky into a vast, invisible extension of America's shield, a force the cartels could neither hide from nor fight. The cartels thought their drones and smuggling tricks gave them an advantage, but the United States Navy's laser weapon changed that. Quiet, accurate, and powerful, it turns the skies the cartels counted on into a place they can't control. After years of speculation, people around the world can finally see the United States Navy's laser weapon in action against cartel operations. For the first time, the power, speed, and precision of this technology are on full display. It shows how modern weapons can stop threats almost instantly without the need for traditional explosives or bullets. The lesson is clear. The future of fighting crime and warfare has arrived, and the balance of power has shifted in favor of those who can control the skies. Along one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, a silent and dangerous threat is growing. Drug cartels are now using high-tech submarines to smuggle massive amounts of narcotics into the United States. These stealthy operations are becoming more frequent and daring, pushing frustration in Washington to new heights. How are these criminal groups able to pull off such secret missions beneath the waves? And more importantly, what message does it send when these subs can slip past defenses and deliver their deadly cargo without being stopped? Join us as we unveil how the United States Navy plans to unleash hell on cartel submarines. Back in the 1980s, drug smugglers were speeding across waves in go-fast boats and flying under the radar in small planes. These powerful boats had multiple engines and could zip past authorities with ease. But when radar technology caught up, those speedy getaways started failing. That's when smugglers looked for a new trick: semi-submarines built to quietly glide beneath the surface. The first big surprise came in 1988, when U.S. officials found a strange, unmanned submarine in Boca Raton, Florida. About 21 feet long and built for remote control, it was designed to be towed and had a hatch that only opened from the outside. Though it was empty when discovered, investigators quickly realized it wasn't just a one-off. It was likely used for sneaky drug deliveries. Fast forward to the early 1990s, and the powerful Medellin cartel saw massive potential. They knew that if they could move cocaine underwater, they'd dodge radar and avoid arrest. Already in control of coca growing, drug processing, and shipping, they saw Narco submarines as the next smart step to tighten their grip on the entire operation. As go-fast boats became more of a liability, the cartels dreamed bigger. They wanted a vessel that could travel long distances, avoid detection, and power itself across oceans. To make it happen, they didn't just rely on local talent. They went international, hiring engineers from the Russian Navy to help design their secretive submarines. Even after the fall of the Medellin cartel and the arrests of the Cali cartel bosses, the dream didn't die. New criminal groups kept the idea alive, pushing more money and energy into submarine tech. They weren't just moving drugs, they were building silent, stealthy machines to carry their empire across the sea. Now they are no longer just chaotic gangs with basic weapons and fast boats. They had become smarter, more organized, and far more strategic. With time, they had gained access to enormous amounts of money, and instead of just spending it on lavish lifestyles, they began investing in something far more dangerous: technology. These cartels had learned to adapt quickly to changes in their environment. They knew that law enforcement officers and military forces were constantly looking for better ways to catch them and block the flow of illegal drugs. So instead of staying one step behind, the cartels pushed forward, using technology to gain the upper hand. This growing battle between both sides turned into a high-tech race. While the cartels worked on making their drug operations faster and more hidden, the police and the military were also busy improving their tools for tracking and surveillance. Both sides were trying to outsmart each other. Cartels didn't just rely on old methods anymore. They were thinking like engineers and tech experts, looking for clever ways to escape detection and stay in control. One of the most surprising results of this ongoing battle was the creation of Narco submarines. These are real, homemade submarines, built for one main purpose: smuggling drugs underwater without being seen. Over the past 20 years, Colombian drug cartels had quietly shifted from using fast boats and small aircraft to building their own submersibles. They were built in hidden workshops deep in the jungle or tucked away in remote areas. Some of these subs could travel for hundreds of miles, staying low and quiet under the surface of the water. Some were fully submersible, while others floated just below the waves, making them hard to spot by radar or patrol planes. This change was driven by the increasing danger of losing entire drug shipments to authorities. Planes were being tracked, boats were being stopped, and cartels were losing millions. So they responded by building something the authorities weren't prepared for, but submarines. Since 2013, this type of transport has helped increase drug trafficking by 10%. It is mostly used to move cocaine from Colombia, where 93% of the cocaine consumed in the U.S. is made, to Central America and Mexico. From there, the drugs are sent into the United States. The DEA says this route now handles about 93% of the cocaine smuggled from South America to North America. In comparison, only 7% moves through the Caribbean islands, mainly the Dominican Republic, before reaching Florida or other areas along the eastern coast of the U.S. A narco submarine, often called a narco sub, is a special type of homemade boat that drug traffickers build to secretly move illegal drugs, especially cocaine. These submarines are self-powered and can travel long distances underwater or just below the surface, which makes them very hard to spot. Over time, the design and technology behind these vessels have become more advanced. Builders have improved the shape, speed, and quietness of the subs, making it even harder for law enforcement to find and stop them. Even though these submarines are expensive to build, drug traffickers still think they're worth the money. The reason is simple. What they gain in return is far greater than what they spend. A single narco sub can carry tons of drugs worth millions, and if just one trip succeeds, it pays for the cost of building the submarine many times over. From a business point of view, it's a smart investment for the cartels. On the other side, military forces and police in different countries have been working more closely together to stop the drug trade. They've shared information, upgraded their equipment, and teamed up for missions. Still, narco subs continue to be a big problem. Their secretive design helps the drugs reach their destinations while avoiding radar and patrol boats. Although some of these subs have been caught over the years, many more likely make it through undetected. When the authorities do manage to seize one of these submarines, it gives them a rare chance to learn how they work. By studying the parts, engines, and materials used, experts can figure out how the subs are built and what routes they might be taking. This helps improve future tracking and interception efforts. Much of this activity is linked to the cocaine trade that started in the Andean region of South America, countries like Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. From there, huge amounts of cocaine are smuggled into the United States every year. According to a United Nations estimate from 2008, the U.S. retail market for cocaine was worth around $88 billion a year. That's an enormous amount of money, and over the last 35 years, it has added up to trillions of dollars in sales. Drug cartels are willing to take big risks and spend a lot on technology because the rewards are so high. Narco submarines are just one part of a larger network of drug smuggling methods. Traffickers also use high-speed boats, known as go-fast boats, small airplanes, and creative hiding places, like stuffing drugs inside shipping containers, food products, or even small items like toys. Sometimes they pay people, called drug mules, to carry small amounts of drugs hidden on or inside their bodies. As of June 2012, experts reported that around 80% of the illegal drug flow from the Andean region, mainly Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, into countries like Honduras, Mexico, and other halfway points before entering the United States happens through the sea. Out of that maritime traffic, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration believed that nearly 30% involved the use of narco submarines. These special smuggling boats have become an important tool for drug traffickers, helping them sneak drugs past patrols and coast guards. Even though the U.S. and its allies try to stop these drug shipments, the success rate is still low. In March 2014, General John F. Kelly, the head of the U.S. Southern Command at the time, spoke to the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee. He explained that due to limited funding and equipment shortages, they had to cancel more than 200 key missions and joint training exercises with other countries. These cancellations left huge gaps in their ability to fight drug trafficking at sea. He admitted that they simply didn't have enough ships, aircraft, or resources to go after all the drug boats they knew were out there. In fact, they could only act on about 26% of the suspected maritime smuggling cases, meaning nearly 3 out of every 4 drug boats went untouched. Because of these shortages, drug smugglers often operate with little fear of being caught. Narco submarines and other smuggling boats continue to move large loads of drugs across the ocean without much interference. Only a small number of them are actually intercepted. Rear Admiral Charles Michel, who served as the director of the Joint Interagency Task Force South, gave more details in June 2012. He said that the U.S. first spotted a self-propelled semi-submersible in the ocean back in 2006. These types of submarines, which move just below the water's surface and are very hard to see, became more common over the next few years. By as many as 60 of these vessels were being used each year, carrying about 330 metric tons of cocaine annually. Originally, these narco subs were used only in the Eastern Pacific, but starting in July 2011, drug cartels began sending them through the Western Caribbean too. JIATF South helped to stop 5 of these submarines in that region, and each one was found carrying over 6.5 metric tons of cocaine. Altogether, 214 narco submarine events have been documented, but only 45 were successfully stopped. That's because these subs are built to be low and quiet, making them extremely difficult to detect. No one is exactly sure how many of these submarines exist, but it's likely that dozens are built every year. Powerful criminal groups in Colombia, such as the FARC, the Rastreros, and the Urabeños, are known to be behind most of their production. Whether more or fewer are made depends on how the subs are used. U.S. officials believe that most are used once and then sunk to hide the evidence. However, Colombian officials think many are reused. This disagreement affects how many new submarines drug cartels need to build every year to replace the ones lost through capture, sinking, or scuttling after delivery. Over the last 20 years, narco submarines have become much more advanced. They have improved in both design and capability. At first, many were only semi-submersible, meaning they traveled just below the surface. But now some are fully submersible and can dive deeper, making them harder to detect. If Colombian drug cartels succeed in their plans to send these fully submersible narco subs all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to West Africa and Europe, it would mark a major shift in smuggling. These long journeys would make each trip so valuable that traffickers likely wouldn't sink the vessels afterward, as they sometimes do with shorter trips. This shift in the drug trade shows how important and profitable the cocaine market is, especially in the United States. Every year, tons of cocaine are smuggled from South America into the U.S., and much of it goes undetected during the early parts of the journey. With so many of these submarines slipping past patrols, it's clear that authorities are struggling to keep up with the traffickers' clever methods and advanced tools. This growing challenge has pushed law enforcement to adapt quickly, but the numbers suggest that traffickers are staying one step ahead, expanding their reach and refining their tactics. In 2024, authorities intercepted a near-record number of narco submarines trying to cross both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. These drug-filled vessels were not just spotted in the usual routes, they started showing up in new areas too. This shows that drug traffickers are relying more and more on these quiet, hard-to-detect submarines to move cocaine to global markets. For many years, narco subs were mainly used to carry cocaine from Colombia's Pacific coast to countries like Mexico or those in Central America. But the latest seizure reports reveal something more troubling. These submarines are not only increasing in number, but also becoming more advanced. They're now built to travel longer distances, avoid detection with better stealth designs, and even reach parts of the world that were not previously targeted by drug cartels. These recent developments show just how serious the situation has become. Cartels are no longer using narco subs just for short coastal trips. Some are now attempting long ocean crossings, such as to Europe or West Africa, which could open up even more dangerous trafficking networks. This shift signals a bold and aggressive strategy by criminal groups who are constantly looking for ways to stay ahead of law enforcement. Of the 240 narco submarines analyzed by Insight Crime, more than half were built in hidden, handmade shipyards along Colombia's Pacific coast. These areas, especially the country's western departments, are covered in thick jungle and crisscrossed by rivers that lead to the ocean. Deep inside narrow estuaries, shielded by tall trees and dense plants, many secret boat-building sites are tucked away. These locations are not only hard to find but are also close to key waterways, making them perfect for launching drug submarines into the sea. Each hidden shipyard acts like a mini criminal workshop. These sites pull together a wide range of people with different skills and roles. There are drug producers, boat builders, mechanical experts, experienced sailors, armed guards, and even engineers. All of them work under the leadership of major criminal groups that have the money and patience to support such complex operations. These groups are willing to wait several months for a profit once the drugs hidden inside the narco subs arrive at their destinations overseas. Between 2019 and 2023, authorities discovered many of these secret yards. Data from SimCon shows that 26 were found in Nariño, 10 in Cauca, and 3 each in Valle del Cauca and Choco. It's no surprise that these places are also major centers for growing coca, the plant used to make cocaine. Having shipyards close to coca fields means the drugs don't have to travel far by land, reducing the risk of being caught before they reach the water. While most narco sub shipyards are based along Colombia's Pacific coast, law enforcement has found similar sites in Brazil, Venezuela, Guyana, and Suriname. This shows that traffickers are expanding their operations and using these boats to reach Europe more directly, where cocaine sells for even higher prices. Some of the most advanced narco subs have been built in surprising places, far from the coast. These inland locations have better access to materials, tools, and skilled workers. A striking example occurred in 2000 when Colombian police discovered a huge, partially completed submarine in a warehouse in a suburb of Bogotá. It was 100 feet long and, according to estimates at the time, could carry up to 15 tons of cocaine. This inland construction proved that cartels weren't limited by location. They were willing to adapt, build smarter, and find ways to hide their work wherever it was safest. In a striking case from 2000, Colombian police uncovered a massive half-built narco submarine in a warehouse in Bogotá. Authorities believed the plan was to finish constructing the sub in Bogotá, then disassemble it, transport it piece by piece to the Pacific coast, and reassemble it for its journey at sea. What raised further concern was the discovery of Russian-language documents at the scene. This led investigators to suspect possible involvement by Russian criminal organizations in the submarine's design or construction, suggesting a deeper and more international web of cooperation in drug trafficking operations. Almost 2 decades later, the sophistication and reach of narco submarine trafficking took another leap. In 2019, European authorities intercepted a 22-meter, low-profile vessel believed to have been built near Manaus, Brazil. From there, the vessel traveled more than 1,200 kilometers down the Amazon River before crossing the Atlantic Ocean to reach Galicia on Spain's northern coast. This marked the first known case of a narco sub successfully crossing the Atlantic, a significant development in the growing use of submersibles in transoceanic drug trafficking. By 2024, interceptions of these stealth vessels surged to near-record levels. Authorities captured 30 narco subs that year, according to data reviewed by Insight Crime. Most of these vessels were caught along established Pacific drug routes between South America and Central America. A staggering 81% of the narco subs in the Insight Crime database were seized in Pacific waters or just off the coast, confirming the region as a major trafficking corridor. Colombian law enforcement continues to focus on stopping these vessels while they are still in rivers or estuaries, where they are easier to locate. However, their success is limited. Only about 1 in 4 seizures happens in these inland waters. Once the subs reach the open ocean, they become incredibly difficult to track, and U.S. security officials estimate that interdiction rates can drop as low as 5%, depending on weather, surveillance coverage, and sea conditions. LPVs, due to their design and intent to evade detection, generally follow routes that exploit gaps in traditional surveillance coverage. A spokesperson from the Joint Interagency Task Force South explained to Insight Crime, "These routes are carefully planned, often taking advantage of unmonitored stretches of ocean where detection is unlikely." Narco subs are often supported by a fleet of smaller boats and fishing vessels that serve as mobile refueling stations along the way. These support boats are positioned at key points along the route. Even though some LPVs can carry up to 1,350 gallons of fuel, rough seas, unexpected detours, or extended evasion from patrols may require earlier refueling stops to complete the journey. Back in 2014, U.S. Southern Command General John Kelly gave grim testimony before Congress. He explained that due to limited resources and the overwhelming number of trafficking attempts, the United States was only able to pursue 26% of all suspected maritime drug trafficking vessels. This shows just how hard it is to stop drug trafficking by sea, especially with the rise of narco submarines. These stealthy subs are hard to find and carry large amounts of drugs. If the U.S. wants to stay ahead in the fight against drug cartels, it must improve its efforts to detect and stop these underwater threats. Have you ever wondered what happens when militants take on the wrong target? Picture two MH-60R Seahawks slicing through dawn over the southern Red Sea, while the Maersk Hangzhou steams below, blissfully unaware of Houthi fast attack boats closing in with RPGs and PKMs. The ship's few security contractors scan the horizon, fingers tight on triggers. Every second counts. Ready today to see what unfolds when cutting-edge helicopters meet heavily armed militants? Let's dive into a truly real showdown where split-second decisions and raw firepower spell the difference between sinking and surviving. Nothing about that morning felt routine. At exactly 6:30 a.m. local time, two U.S. Navy MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, call signs Lancer 71 from USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and Lancer 72 from USS Gravely, were hovering just above the surface of the southern Red Sea. Their mission was simple in description, but critical in intent: provide top cover for a naval task force patrolling those waters. For months, Houthi attacks had been on the rise in the same area, making global trade nervous and shipping costs climb. Ships had been rerouting, waiting on slow convoys and watching every radar screen as they passed near Yemen. These MH-60R Seahawks aren't ordinary choppers. Since 2010, they've served as the U.S. Navy's primary helicopters for hunting submarines and watching surface ships. They replaced older SH-60B and SH-60F aircraft and quickly proved their worth by flying more often and staying ready longer than any other maritime helicopter. They carry advanced radars, sonar systems, and a mix of weapons, enough to handle threats from under the waves to above deck. On this morning, though, the patrol had been quiet. The pilots scanned the horizon, looking for anything suspicious, but so far the seas and the sky had given no hints of trouble. Below them, about 55 nautical miles southwest of Al Hudaydah, Yemen, the Singapore-flagged container ship Maersk Hangzhou steamed toward its next port, carrying dozens of containers stacked high on its deck. It was a familiar sight in these trade routes, part of the flow that sends goods across the world. But that day, the Hangzhou had a layer of extra protection. Security contractors from Trident Group stood watch on deck, ready to deal with any unwanted visitors. With Houthi forces in the area launching fast attack boats, firing rockets, and disrupting shipping lanes, a team of trained guards was something no captain wanted to sail without. As the sun rose, its light turned the gentle ripples of the Red Sea golden. From their vantage point a few hundred feet up, the Seahawk crews could see another ship or two on the horizon and the occasional fishing boat, but nothing that screamed danger. Meanwhile, the Maersk Hangzhou's crew went through their routine checks: engines, deck lines, and cargo latches, making sure everything was secure for the day ahead. The Trident contractors, wearing their distinctive gear, scanned the water for any fast boats that might slip in close. Their drill was well rehearsed. If small craft crept too near, they would sound alarms, lock down key areas, and hold their positions until they could see if the boats were friendly or hostile. Unknown to the Seahawk pilots, a formation of Houthi fast attack boats was moving quietly from the coast near Hodeidah. The Houthi group uses fast boats called the Tufan series, often to shake up shipping and keep larger ships on edge. These machines can sneak close without risking a crew and add another layer of worry for anyone sailing through the region. Their plan was straightforward: surge forward, close in on the Maersk Hangzhou, and try to board before the crew could react. If successful, they would seize control of the ship's deck and cargo. But the attackers did not know that Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 were patrolling overhead, or that their sensors were on high alert for exactly this kind of move. Back on Maersk, Hangzhou, the Trident security contractors had orders to stay extra vigilant. They watched the water surface with binoculars and listened to every radio call. When anything moved faster than a fishing skiff or cast a shadow too large for a local show, they were trained to report it immediately. Under that early morning light, the breakers of the Red Sea hid many things. Shadows could be dolphins, dark shapes might be drifting debris, but these contractors knew to trust their instincts. If the boat slipped past 6 nautical miles out, alarms would sound, and the crew would lock down key areas of the ship. By the time the Houthi boats closed in to 6 nautical miles, the Maersk Hangzhou's alarm bells rang out. The Trident guards moved to their defensive positions, some behind steel barriers near the deckhouse, others checking that fire hoses were ready if needed. They called into radios, trying to warn off any approaching craft and alert any friendly forces nearby. Above them, Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 were still circling, their crews scanning radar scopes for the same signs of trouble. Neither the Seahawk pilots nor the ship's crew knew how quickly events could unfold once hostiles drew near. But at that moment, both sets of eyes, those in the cockpits and those on the vessel's deck, were locked on the same target area, and everyone was poised, ready to respond the instant they saw the next move. Everything hinged on a few seconds and the weapons each side had. On Maersk Hangzhou, the security team had nothing more than M4 rifles and an M240 machine gun. Against that, the Houthi boats were packing rockets, RPGs with thermobaric warheads, and belt-fed PKM machine guns, all weapons that shoot farther, hit harder, and rip through thin metal hulls like paper. In the quiet before the storm, both sides knew an intense fight was coming, but neither could fully predict how fast it would all unfold. Within minutes, those small, fast boats would close the gap and press themselves right up against the merchant ship's hull. The Hangzhou's defenses, just a handful of rifles and a single heavy machine gun, were simply outclassed. Meanwhile, high above the waves, the 2 Seahawk helicopters listened for a distress call from below. The moment that call crackled through the radios, both choppers sprang to life. In fixed-wing terms, they needed to close a 26 nautical mile gap, which at full tilt, 160 knots, would still take about 9 minutes. But by then, the Houthis would already be climbing over the side. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. At exactly 6:31 a.m., the MH-60Rs, call signs Lancer 71 and Lancer 72, picked up suspicious contacts on their radar. 4 Iranian-supplied, Boghammer-style fast attack boats were converging on Maersk Hangzhou. Each one measured 7 to 10 meters long, sleek and low to the water, built for speed rather than comfort. Traveling at roughly 50 knots apiece, they raced in a tight, converging formation, like wolves closing in on a wounded deer. Their crews, 3 to 4 Houthi militants per boat, carried PKM machine guns, AK-47 rifles, and RPGs. 2 of those RPG teams had thermobaric Taba-14 warheads, the kind of weapon that can blast through 300 millimeters of rolled armor. For a container ship with a hull barely 25 millimeters thick, that meant a direct hit could punch a hole the size of a watermelon without breaking a sweat. Even more unsettling, each Houthi boat was rigged with a Starlink terminal. With that setup, they weren't operating blind. Real-time data streamed back and forth between the boats, overhead drones, coastal spotters, and command posts in Hodeidah. If one fast boat pilot spotted something on the water, he'd share it instantly with the rest. That level of coordination, feeding live imagery and position reports into a shared network, meant these attacks weren't random or desperate raids. They were carefully planned strikes, following what Iranian naval experts call asymmetric doctrine. Put simply, the Houthis were using cheap, fast platforms and smart communications to overwhelm a bigger target. Trident Group security contractors on Maersk Hangzhou braced by the stern and port side as 4 Houthi fast attack boats approached. At several kilometers out, they fired M240B machine guns, hitting one of Boghammer's hulls and spraying water. Only one staggered. The others closed in, engines roaring, guns ready. The boats covered the final 1,200 meters in seconds, reaching 600 meters inside RPG range, spiking tension. Any RPG or thermobaric rocket could punch a hull hole or spark a deck explosion, risking a boarding. The Seahawks were 9 minutes away. The ship's defense relied on shouted commands, precise M240 fire, and the attackers' fragile boats. In that moment, 6:31 and 47 seconds into the morning, the distance was almost gone. The attackers' shift from 1,800 meters to 600 meters had taken less time than it takes to count one Mississippi. The next move would be the most dangerous, when the Houthi boat slipped under the boom of the Hangzhou's deck and tried to climb aboard. At that sliver of time, everyone involved knew the outcome would set the stage for what came next. Either a close-quarters fight on deck or the arrival of U.S. Navy Hawks just in time. But as the boats closed, the divide between success and failure was measured in mere feet, and those few seconds could decide it all. That morning, everything boiled down to a few critical moments. On Maersk Hangzhou's deck, the security team's suppressive fire managed to smash one of the attackers' rudder assemblies, sending one Boghammer skiff veering off course. But the larger threat was still barreling toward them. The RPG gunner on Boat 2 pulled the trigger and sent a thermobaric warhead screaming in their direction. It zipped past, coming within a hair's breadth, just 3 meters, of the ship's superstructure, the bridge area that sticks up above the main deck, where the captain and crew steer in coordinate defenses. If that shot had landed, the Hangzhou would have lost its ability to maneuver or call for help, leaving it a sitting duck. At that moment, the trenches of sand or the stacked crates on deck weren't going to hold back the Houthi militants for much longer. The security detail was on the brink of being overrun, and that's when the Seahawks finally appeared. The M60R helicopters, Lancer 71 and Lancer 72, answered the distress call as quickly as physics would allow. But they weren't teleporters. From their patrol orbit, they were still 26 nautical miles away. Even pushing their turbine engines to scream at 160 knots, it would take roughly 9 minutes to reach the Hangzhou. And those 9 minutes felt like an eternity when you're staring down attackers armed with rocket-propelled grenades. When the trapped security team on deck staved off the skiffs just long enough, the Boghammers were forced to pause at around 600 meters out. They wanted to plaster the ship with RPG fire before making their boarding attempt. That brief lull proved to be precisely the opening the Seahawks needed. By 6:39 a.m., just 8 minutes after the first shots, both helicopters had closed the distance to just a mile. With their rotors whipping the salty air, Lancer 71 and 72 were in position. But having helicopters overhead doesn't automatically mean a quick zap and a tidy finish. The pilots still had to figure out which boats to hit first. Hidden beneath the nose of each Seahawk helicopter is the AN/APS 153-V radar system, a remarkable piece of technology. Designed to scan the sea surface and detect tiny contacts, this radar sends out radio waves that bounce back from ships, submarines, and small boats. Its precision allows pilots and crew to spot objects in the water from miles away, day or night, in weather or through fog and rain. The information it gathers is displayed on screens inside the aircraft, guiding decision-makers to track moving targets or search for potential threats. Thanks to this radar, the Seahawks can carry out reconnaissance and safety missions with confidence. From nearly 42 kilometers away, it first picked up the 4 Iranian-supplied Boghammer-style boats. But the Red Sea's choppy waters throw up plenty of sea clutter, random reflections off waves that look like legitimate contacts. To sort real threats from the foam, the radar needed a better look. Initially, the radar was painting a chaotic picture, tracking 32 separate contacts, from fishing dhows to drifting debris. To cut through the noise, pilots switched to narrow pulse mode, sending half to 1 microsecond bursts for tracking precise location, speed, and size data. Like zooming in to avoid background blur, this helped Seahawks lock onto 4 attack boats. But narrow pulses alone couldn't deliver pinpoint targeting, so they activated the Moving Target Indicator, MTI, which uses the Doppler effect. When radar waves bounce off a moving vessel, the frequency shifts, like a motorcycle's engine pitch, rising and falling as it passes. Measuring these shifts lets radar distinguish a real boat from a wave. With MTI humming, pilots suddenly saw each Boghammer's true speed, heading, and size. No more guessing. The formidable fast attack crafts appeared in razor-sharp focus, engines churning the sea as they steamed toward Maersk Hangzhou's flanks, closing in rapidly and dangerously. At 1 mile out, the Seahawks held their positions overhead, circling like guardian angels. Their arrival shifted the balance. For now, the Houthi skiffs had to think twice before swarming the deck. But as those 4 boats roared beneath, their crews still gripped RPGs and PKMs. They could feel the weight of 2 rotary-wing jets ready to rain down fire if needed. In those tense seconds, with the radar feeding data into their consoles and the MTI isolating targets from the waves, the Seahawk pilots prepared to make the first move. Their mission: protect the unarmed container ship and its security team from being overwhelmed. And that is where this extract leaves off, with 2 Seahawk helicopters hovering above, sensors locked on hostile boats closing in, and the next decisive moments hanging in the balance. By the time the helicopters closed in, the pilots had already used the radar's moving target indicator to pick out which blips on the screen were actual boats, not just waves. But once MTI confirmed something solid was moving, they switched to inverse synthetic aperture radar, or ISAR. Think of ISAR as a high-tech camera that figures out a precise picture of whatever it locks onto, using those same Doppler shifts that tip them off to movement. In practice, this meant the pilots could see real-time detailed images of the fast attack boats, their size, shape, and even some markings on the hull. No more guessing which targets were the attackers. Now they had visual confirmation that the Houthi boats were dead ahead, and with that, it was go time. Each Seahawk was ready for exactly this kind of fight. Under each side door sat a GAU 21.50 caliber machine gun, often called 50s in military lingo, called crew served because they needed both a pilot to fly and a door gunner to pull the trigger. These guns could spit out up to 1,100 rounds every single minute, with bullets reaching out nearly 2,000 meters. The ammo load was a mix of armor-piercing incendiary rounds, which could punch through metal and start fires, and tracer rounds, which left a little streak of light so the door gunners could see exactly where their shots were going. All told, the Seahawks had enough firepower to shred the thin-skinned Boghammer boats from well above the waterline. But the Houthis had one more card to play, and they played it at 6:40 a.m. As the helicopters drifted into position, 4 PKM machine guns on the lead Houthi boat opened up. The tracers snapped in the serious early morning light, with rounds zipping past within just 15 meters of the Seahawks' rotors. That's close. So close that the chaos of bullets could have easily shredded rotors or punched into a fuel tank. In the Houthis' minds, getting in the first shots might have knocked a Seahawk out of the sky. Instead, it turned out to be their last mistake. Without hesitation, both helicopters dropped lower down to about 150 feet off the water, tightening the distance so their own guns could get the most accurate angle. At the same time, knowing how quickly things can go south, each Seahawk sprayed countermeasures behind them. They released a dozen bright-burning MJU-68B flares, each one blasting up to 2,200 degrees Celsius and burning for nearly 2.5 seconds. Alongside the flares, they dropped 24 bundles of RR-180 chaff, which scattered into a kind of silver cloud to confuse any radar-guided missile. No one saw a missile trace, so it turned out these extra precautions weren't needed. But in a situation like this, you don't wait to find out if the bad guys have a shoulder-fired heat seeker. You assume they might. And then all hell broke loose in earnest. Exactly 1 minute after the Houthis' first salvo, at 6:41, Lancer 71's door gunner picked out Boat 1 as the highest threat, a small craft roaring forward with a fresh set of PKMs and an RPG launcher aimed at the ship below. The Seahawk pilot held steady, giving the gunner a stable platform. 3 bursts of .50 caliber bullets came screaming out, each round a potential game changer. The first 2 streams of fire rattled across the bow, but the third was a direct hit, slamming right into the engine block. For those who know anything about boat engines, that's the critical hit. Destroy the motor, and the craft can't maneuver or flee. But here's what really made sparks fly. The slug that struck didn't just stop the engine, it ruptured the fuel cell. In an instant, a fireball erupted so bright the pilots could see it from their cockpit, and debris from the burning hull shot into the air. Within 45 seconds of that first burst, Boat 1 was no more than a smoldering wreck. As the flames spread, it took on water and sank beneath the waves, leaving nothing but smoke in a trembling wake. For the crew on Maersk Hangzhou below, the sound of that explosion and the sight of boat debris trailing off was the clearest promise that help had arrived. The other three Bogomars, momentarily stunned by Boat 1's destruction, wavered in their advance. For a brief, crucial moment, the Hangzhou's security team could breathe a little easier, and the Seahawks had proven their might. At that exact point, the fight was far from over, but Boat 1's sinking marked a turning point. It was the first domino to fall in what would become a decisive defense of a merchant ship under siege. Before the first boghammer even finished sliding beneath the waves, Lancer 71 banked hard to the left and locked onto Boat 2. Imagine a helicopter suddenly tipping, its nose pointing toward a small craft speeding across choppy water. That's exactly what the pilot did. The door gunner let loose a quick burst of 50 caliber rounds that blew out the rudder. Without steering, the little skiff started veering wildly, like a go-kart with a busted wheel. The gunner didn't let up. He poured in a solid 3-second spray of armor-piercing incendiary rounds into the already crippled boat. Within moments, Boat 2 listed violently, water gushed in through the shattered hull, and by 6:42 a.m., it rolled over and capsized, disappearing into the depths. With two helicopters circling overhead, the pilots didn't waste a second. They shifted their sights to Boat 3. This time, both Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 trained their guns together on a single target. The twin streams of tracers looked almost poetic, like synchronized swimmers cutting through the water, but made of bullets. In just a few heartbeats, dozens of armor-piercing shells hammered into Boat 3's underside, punching holes below its waterline. The crew on that skiff realized they were done for. Water flooded in faster than their frantic attempts to bail it out. By 6:44 a.m., Boat 3 gave a final lurch and sank, leaving only a swirl of oily foam where it had been. Boat 4, seeing three of its comrades sent to Davy Jones's locker, decided discretion was the better part of valor. Instead of charging in, it spun around and booked it back out to sea. Smoke trailed from its damaged engine as it limped northwest, trying to put distance between itself and the Seahawk helicopters. Lancer 71 and Lancer 72 could have chased it, but their orders were clear. Stay with the merchant ship. With Boat 4 racing away, the helicopters hovered above the Maersk Hangzhou, their guns still hot but their focus returning to protecting the vessel. In just under 7 minutes, from the first crash of bullets to the last sinking hull, the two Seahawks had sent 3 Boghamar boats to the bottom. Between them, they'd fired roughly 1,800 rounds of ammunition, each designed to rip through metal while keeping as much distance from their own rotors as possible. But for the U.S. military brass, this was only the start of their message. Sinking a few boats in self-defense was one thing. They wanted to make it painfully clear that attacking U.S. escorts would carry far greater costs. Within 8 hours of that morning's skirmish, the guided missile destroyer USS Gravely steamed close to the Yemeni coast. Its target, a handful of coastal radar stations the Houthis had been using to give data to their fast attack boats. Those sites at Jabal al-Tayr, Al-Mocha, and Ras Isa had been eyes in the sky, telling Houthi skippers where U.S. ships were, what courses they took, and when they might slip into danger. Starting later that afternoon, Gravely's 5-inch Mark 45 Mod 4 naval gun swung into action. Each round weighed about 70 pounds, packed with high explosives or airburst charges, flying at roughly 2,600 feet per second up to 9 miles out. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Gravely moved up and down the coast with relative ease. At each radar installation, it unleashed a barrage, blast after blast, until 3 entire sites lay in ruins. Post-strike drone assessments showed that those hits degraded Houthi maritime surveillance by at least 60%. That meant those fast boats would now have to rely on less accurate spotting methods, like someone on shore peering through binoculars rather than satellite-linked radars. With those coastal eyes taken out, the Houthis lost the tactical edge that had made their swarm tactics so deadly. But U.S. retaliation didn't stop at taking out radars. New Year's Day brought another round of strikes. On January 1st, just after sunset, Four FA-18E Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadron 131 took off from USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Each jet carried two AGM-154C Joint Standoff Weapons, JSOWs, smart glide bombs designed to blast through reinforced concrete. Each JSOWC had a 500-pound broach warhead, which on impact unleashed a molten metal jet capable of carving through 3.7 meters of solid concrete like warm butter. At 6:43 p.m. local time, those four missiles struck the Al-Durahimi missile warehouse. One by one, explosions rocked the compound as secondary blasts erupted from the stacks of rockets and missiles inside. Intercepts of Houthi radio chatter afterward confirmed what everyone expected. 18 Qasef drones were destroyed on the ground before ever lifting off, along with 4 Noor anti-ship missiles and multiple missile guidance kits. Critically, 2 Iranian advisors who were there to assist and 12 Houthi operators lost their lives in the blast. That final strike sent a loud and clear message. The U.S. response to Houthi aggression wouldn't end once the helicopters went home and the Bot-4 skiff had slipped away. From shutting down radar sites to wiping out drone production and missile stocks, the Americans were determined to remove the Houthis' ability to launch future attacks. If you attacked a U.S.-escorted ship, you wouldn't just face immediate defense, you'd feel the consequences days later when bombs and rounds rained on your assets long after the smoke cleared. The cartels have money, weapons, and power, and for years they've evaded U.S. forces, but there's one fatal mistake that would seal their fate: targeting a U.S. national treasure. For decades, the B-2 Spirit has struck from the shadows, silent and unstoppable. But after its fearsome display in the Middle East, whispers began spreading. Cartel strongholds are now rumored to be arming heat-seeking missiles and planning to shoot down the bomber. Could they really pull it off? Or would it trigger something far worse? Join us as we reveal what happens when a drug cartel tries to take down the U.S. bomber. The B-2 Spirit is one of the most advanced military aircraft ever created, designed by Northrop Grumman to serve as the cornerstone of the United States' strategic bombing capability. It was conceived not for speed or dogfighting, but for invisibility. Operating at the intersection of aerospace engineering and stealth warfare, this bomber is intended to penetrate deep into enemy territory without detection, delivering precision strikes with devastating payloads. The aircraft's defining feature is its flying wing configuration, a design that lacks a vertical stabilizer in traditional fuselage. This aerodynamic structure, combined with specialized radar-absorbing materials, allows the B-2 to remain undetected by most enemy defense systems. Its smooth, tailless shape helps deflect radar waves, while the outer coating, composed of classified radar-absorbent polymers known as RAM, absorbs what little radar signal remains. This paint alone represents a classified but critical part of the aircraft's effectiveness, shared in concept with other stealth jets like the F-22 and F-35. Beneath the B-2 composite skin lies a reinforced frame built from high-strength steel, enabling the wings to flex during flight. The external shell includes a complex mix of materials: fiberglass epoxy along the edges for radar deflection, graphite epoxy across the main wing surface for strength and lightness, and titanium around engine areas to withstand intense heat. Fiberglass polyamide is also used, and it is chosen for its heat resistance and radar-absorbing qualities. Even the cruise station assembly contains aluminum at the base for structural balance. To reduce its thermal signature, the aircraft houses its engines deep within the body. Air is drawn from concealed intakes, and exhaust is cooled before being released, minimizing the heat trail that modern missiles typically rely on to lock onto targets. This design ensures the B-2 remains elusive not only to radar but also to infrared tracking systems. Despite its complexity, the B-2 operates with a crew of only 2, a pilot and a mission commander. They sit side by side in a compact cockpit equipped with a suite of highly sophisticated avionics. These include systems for fuel regulation, weapon targeting, navigation, and terrain tracking, all of which enable missions to continue seamlessly, even in darkness or hostile terrain. For emergencies, the cockpit is fitted with ejection seats, a rare feature in strategic bombers of this scale and cost. The bomber's capability is as imposing as its stealth. It can carry both conventional and nuclear weapons, offering flexibility across tactical and strategic missions. Its internal bay can be configured for different payloads. One option includes up to 80 MiG-82 bombs, each weighing 500 pounds, fitted to a suspension system capable of delivering roughly 40,000 pounds of gravity-based ordnance. Alternatively, the bay can accommodate a rotary launcher system for 16 AGM-158 cruise missiles, each with a range of 230 miles and an estimated cost of $1.5 million. Once released, these missiles deploy wings mid-flight and autonomously guide themselves to their target. Although it is not built for speed, the B-2 has extraordinary endurance. It can travel over 6,000 miles without refueling and far more with in-air refueling support. Its cruising altitude reaches up to 50,000 feet, well above commercial aircraft, and its silent presence often goes unnoticed until the damage is already done. With an estimated price exceeding $2 billion per unit, the B-2 Spirit is among the most expensive aircraft ever built. Fewer than 2 dozen exist, and each is treated as a strategic asset of national importance. Missions are rare, deliberate, and heavily safeguarded, reinforcing the bomber's role as a last resort instrument of war. On the other hand, drug cartels operating across Latin America, particularly in nations like Mexico and Colombia, are not mere criminal gangs, but vast, sophisticated networks with extraordinary financial resources, firepower, and political reach. In many regions, these groups function more like private armies or parallel governments, exerting control over local police forces, municipal authorities, and even national institutions. Their influence is sustained not only through violence but also through strategic generosity, providing food, jobs, and protection to underserved communities, thereby securing local loyalty. The wealth of these organizations is staggering. Cartels such as the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel rake in billions of dollars annually, primarily through the trafficking of drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl. These narcotics are produced at minimal cost and sold at immense profit, especially in the United States and Europe. Some cartels, like Escobar's Medellin cartel in its prime, reportedly earned as much as $70 million a day. This financial power enables them to build infrastructure, bribe officials, launder money through elaborate networks of front businesses and cryptocurrencies, and acquire cutting-edge technology. In many cases, their budgets rival or exceed those of the very law enforcement agencies tasked with dismantling them. Armament is one of the cartel's most significant investments. The range of arms in their possession extends far beyond conventional firearms and includes some of the most lethal, high-grade equipment found on global battlefields. Cartels commonly stockpile automatic rifles such as AK-47s, M16s, and AR-15s, many of which are trafficked across the US-Mexico border. These weapons are not only widely available on the black market but are frequently modified after acquisition. Mexican security forces have previously reported seizing thousands of altered rifles in a single year. For instance, in 2009 alone, authorities confiscated over 4,400 modified AK-47 and AR-15 variants, many of which had been illegally converted to allow automatic fire. These seizures offer only a glimpse into a much broader inventory still circulating among cartel groups. However, it is the more advanced and far-reaching weapons that pose the gravest concern, particularly when viewed through the lens of international security. The presence of anti-tank and anti-aircraft systems among cartel stockpiles marks a dramatic escalation in their threat level. Reports have surfaced of cartels, such as the infamous Sinaloa organization, acquiring FGM-148 Javelin missile systems, shoulder-launched guided weapons capable of disabling armored vehicles from more than 2 miles away. These missiles use a tandem warhead system designed to penetrate advanced armor plating and have demonstrated exceptional accuracy, with a reported success rate of 94% in combat conditions. Even more alarming is the fact that some cartel members appear to have received proper training in the operation of these weapons. In interviews, individuals affiliated with cartel groups have admitted not only to possessing javelins but also to understanding how to deploy them effectively. This suggests access not merely to hardware, but also technical knowledge, raising questions about where such training was obtained and whether more sophisticated instruction networks are in play. In recent years, Mexican cartels have shot at military helicopters. In 2015, a drug cartel in Jalisco used a rocket launcher to take down an army helicopter. The helicopter was transporting soldiers and equipment when it was hit. The crash killed several people. This attack showed just how bold and dangerous cartels can be when they have heavy weapons. In Colombia, during the decades-long war with drug lords and rebels, planes and helicopters were often targeted. Groups like the FARC used stolen or homemade weapons to shoot at police aircraft. These were not high-tech planes, but they were important to the country's fight against crime. This made them targets. The origin of these weapons is difficult to trace. The U.S. Department of Defense, for example, lost track of dozens of Javelin systems during the Iraq conflict, and some may have filtered into criminal hands through third-party trafficking or black market sales. Beyond Javelins, authorities in Mexico have previously intercepted shipments containing Stinger missiles and AT-4 anti-tank launchers, both of which are capable of engaging aircraft and armored ground targets, respectively. Aside from individual weapons, some cartels have constructed improvised armored vehicles, so-called narco tanks, or monsters, engineered to break through police barricades and endure gunfire. Surveillance drones are increasingly used for reconnaissance and, in some instances, to deliver small explosives. Their smuggling networks are equally advanced, employing submarines, fast boats, and private aircraft to transport contraband across international borders with astonishing success. Personnel is another pillar of their strength. Cartels frequently recruit former soldiers, elite police officers, and special forces operatives. These individuals bring professional-grade tactical knowledge and combat skills, enabling the organizations to conduct sophisticated operations, rivaling those of state militaries. Given such vast resources, it's theoretically possible that a well-funded cartel could attempt to target a high-value military asset like the U.S. B-2 Spirit bomber. In terms of raw capital, they could afford to acquire black market missile systems, radar tracking tools, or even external technical support to help identify and attack airborne targets. Yet the feasibility of such an operation collapses when considering the complexity of targeting a B-2. This aircraft was specifically engineered to evade detection, using advanced stealth technology that makes it nearly invisible to conventional radar systems. Most cartels, even those with immense wealth, do not possess the specialized tracking systems or trained technicians necessary to lock onto such a target. Even many national militaries struggle to detect the B-2 at cruising altitude, roughly 50,000 feet. Furthermore, the limited range of most black market missile systems makes high-altitude interception virtually impossible. Manpads, for example, are designed to strike helicopters or low-flying planes and lack the propulsion to reach aircraft flying at such extreme elevations. Without advanced radar and guided missile systems capable of reaching those heights, any launch attempt would be blind and ineffective. Even under ideal conditions, if a B-2 were flying low during a bombing run, taking off, or landing, cartels would still face monumental challenges. Spotting the aircraft in time, coordinating a precise strike, and overcoming its suite of defensive countermeasures, including flares and electronic jamming, would require elite training and near-perfect execution. In addition, B-2 missions are often accompanied by support from drones, satellites, and fighter escorts. But perhaps the most significant deterrent isn't technical, it's geopolitical. Successfully downing a U.S. stealth bomber would constitute an act of war. The retaliation from the United States would be immediate and devastating. The cartel responsible would face not just national police or army units, but the full force of American military power, with no hesitation and no room for negotiation. However, the cartels are not new to war against the government. For nearly 2 decades, Mexico has been embroiled in a relentless conflict against powerful drug cartels, a war that continues to claim lives without delivering a decisive victory. Despite extensive efforts by Mexican authorities and billions in U.S. support, the violence remains staggering. Since the government formally declared war on the cartels in 2006, the country has suffered over 460,000 homicides, a figure that underscores the scale and brutality of the crisis. In the early stages of the conflict, former President Felipe Calderón took a militarized approach. Tens of thousands of soldiers were deployed across the nation to reinforce or replace local police forces. This surge initially yielded results. 25 of the country's 37 most wanted drug lords were captured or killed. But the strategy had unintended consequences. Rather than dismantling cartel power, it splintered the criminal landscape. Smaller, more elusive and violent gangs quickly filled the vacuum, escalating the brutality and making it harder for authorities to track and neutralize them. Subsequent administrations shifted their focus from confronting cartels directly to managing the country's soaring murder rate. This change in strategy allowed many of the fractured criminal factions to thrive in the shadows, relying on agility, anonymity, and ruthless violence to maintain control. While Mexico's military, despite its size, struggles against well-armed and deeply embedded enemies, the United States presents an entirely different kind of force. Should the U.S. ever commit to a direct campaign against the cartels, the balance of power would shift dramatically. The United States possesses one of the most formidable military forces in the world, both in manpower and technology. With approximately 1.3 million active duty personnel and nearly 800,000 reservists, the American military stands ready to respond to threats across the globe. In a full-scale mobilization, millions more could be drafted, though such a step would be unnecessary when confronting criminal networks like the Mexican cartels. Its arsenal matches its size. The U.S. military holds over 4,600 main battle tanks, nearly 400,000 ground vehicles for combat and transport, 641 multiple launch rocket systems, and close to 2,000 artillery pieces. Ground forces are equipped with modern weapons, including large numbers of M4 carbines and Javelin missile systems, standard tools that give individual soldiers a significant edge in combat. Despite this overwhelming superiority, engaging the cartels presents a unique set of complications. Unlike conventional armies, cartel forces do not operate from fixed military bases. Their operations are embedded in civilian areas, small towns and city neighborhoods, where they exploit the population as both camouflage and shield. This makes direct attacks complex, as American troops must avoid unnecessary civilian harm while dismantling criminal networks. To navigate this terrain, the U.S. would likely adopt a strategy based on isolation and precision. Rather than launching broad offensives, American forces would surround cartel-held territories with armored convoys, establishing secure checkpoints to cut off all movement in and out. Only after a complete lockdown would ground teams advance, relying on real-time intelligence to target specific cartel facilities. In these urban environments, U.S. soldiers would function more like specialized counter-terror units than traditional infantry. Their movements would be careful and deliberate, aimed at dismantling infrastructure without triggering indiscriminate destruction. Resistance, however, would be expected. Armed with smuggled heavy weapons, including reports of Javelin missiles, cartel fighters could attempt ambushes and sabotage, using their familiarity with the terrain to create short-term tactical challenges. Still, in any prolonged conflict, the balance would tip overwhelmingly in favor of the U.S. military. Its superior coordination, firepower, and intelligence infrastructure far outpace anything the cartels can mount. That intelligence advantage is already visible. In early 2025, U.S. reconnaissance aircraft conducted at least 18 specialized flights along the Mexican border, far more than the one-per-month frequency seen in earlier years. These spy planes, operating with Mexico's full cooperation, now scan the skies constantly, mapping cartel supply lines, identifying secret airstrips, and tracking vehicle movements from above. Even without full-scale deployment, the U.S. has already demonstrated dominance in the air and sea. Major cartel positions have been struck, maritime blockades are in place, and American aircraft patrol Mexican airspace with precision. But while the campaign has proven effective, the cartels are far from broken. Over time, these criminal organizations have evolved from loosely organized smuggling rings into militarized factions. Many operate training camps where recruits learn guerrilla tactics, urban combat techniques, and the use of improvised explosives. Their fighters, often clad in military-style gear, are capable of launching surprise attacks, setting traps, and vanishing into the civilian population. This ability to hide in plain sight gives them an edge in asymmetrical warfare, blending into local communities they can carry out attacks while intimidating civilians into silence. Fear, corruption, and control form the pillars of their local power. Yet the cartels suffer from a critical weakness: fragmentation. Rather than a unified enemy, Mexico hosts a volatile mix of rival groups, including the Sinaloa Cartel, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Los Zetas, and others, each vying for dominance. As American strikes intensify, these factions would likely begin to turn on each other, competing for resources and territory. Internal discord would further weaken their ability to mount any coordinated resistance. This disunity also creates a valuable opening for U.S. intelligence agencies. Surveillance tools, including satellites, drones, and signal intercepts, can monitor cartel movements, intercept communications, and trace heat signatures. Once the group responsible for downing the B-2 bomber is identified, the response will be swift and absolute. Precision airstrikes would likely follow, targeting cartel safe houses, weapons caches, drug labs, and leadership compounds. Afterwards, elite special operations forces might be deployed to eliminate or capture high-value targets. These units operate quietly, often under the cover of night, and rely on continuous intelligence support from air and space assets. But the response would not stop at the battlefield. Economically, the U.S. would suffocate the cartel's financial system. Bank accounts, front businesses, and even digital assets such as cryptocurrency wallets would be frozen or seized. International cooperation would ensure that the cartel's ability to move funds, buy weapons, or pay off officials would be severely restricted. Without money, their capacity to recruit, equip, and wage war would collapse. Cutting off the drug trade would remain a core objective. Intelligence indicates that the majority of cocaine entering the U.S. is produced in Colombia and smuggled north through Mexico. To disrupt this, the U.S. Navy may expand its presence in the South Pacific, intercepting ocean-bound shipments. Land-based checkpoints at Central American borders, especially near Nicaragua, would help sever overland routes. The strategy is simple: isolate the cartels, dry up their revenue, and eliminate their influence. Any cartel bold enough to strike at a strategic American asset like a B-2 bomber would not face measured retaliation. They would face complete disintegration.
The United States Navy is reaching its limit. After years of relentless cartel activity, smuggling routes, brutal violence, and a crumbling border situation, America is now responding with a force unlike anything seen before. Warships, stealth aircraft, and advanced drones are sweeping across the southern frontier with a message loud and clear. This is our line. Don't cross it. This isn't a bluff. It marks the beginning of a military campaign that could reshape the cartel war forever. The only question is, can the cartels survive what's coming? Here's how the U.S. Navy is cracking down on cartel operations at the border. Back in March, President Donald Trump officially declared 8 major cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That move gave the U.S. military, especially the Navy, sweeping counterterrorism authority. Around the same time, Mexico's Senate agreed to a joint training initiative between America's 7th Special Forces Group and Mexico's elite naval marine units. But in truth, these moves were just the surface. Trump had already begun quietly mobilizing military assets on January 20th, the very day he was sworn in for a second term. The public announcements came later. The operations were already underway. Since then, both U.S. and Mexican officials have acknowledged at least 18 aerial surveillance missions over Mexican territory. Among the aircraft used, one in particular has drawn global attention: the MQ-9 Reaper drone. This is no ordinary surveillance tool. It's the U.S. military's primary drone for intelligence gathering and pinpoint strikes. It can carry 8 Hellfire missiles, including the notorious Ninja Bomb, which doesn't explode but slices through its target with whirling blades. The Reaper name fits for a reason. The drone can fly over 1,100 miles and remain airborne for up to 40 hours without landing. Onboard systems include high-resolution infrared sensors, real-time video feeds, and a state-of-the-art targeting module known as the AN/DAS-4 capable of spotting a person from 30,000 feet or reading license plates from far beyond the horizon. Due to its effectiveness, the CIA has even loaned Reapers to the DEA for counter-cartel operations. This interagency cooperation, originally developed under President Biden, focuses on locating hidden drug facilities buried deep in rural Mexico. Yet once Trump took office again, the mission accelerated. Drone activity increased, and a full-scale military deployment followed. Within days of Trump's return, the southern border saw a military surge. By the end of March, over 2,000 troops were assigned to border operations. Among them, more than 140 intelligence specialists from agencies like the CIA and NSA. The Navy and Border Patrol had been fighting hard already, but the cartels stayed one step ahead by diving beneath the surface, literally. Submersibles, once considered too advanced for criminal groups, became a new frontier for smuggling. These aren't military-grade submarines. Early versions from the 90s were handmade with plywood and fiberglass in dense, swampy terrain where satellites couldn't detect them. But today's Narco subs are built by skilled engineers. Modern versions stretch up to 80 feet long, can travel over 2,500 miles, and cost upwards of $2 million to construct. Crewed by 5 men, each one can haul 10 tons of cocaine, worth about $150 million. Their design makes them incredibly hard to track. Painted in flat blues and grays to blend with ocean waves, they leave almost no wake. Some are even lined with lead panels to absorb heat, making them invisible to thermal imaging. If spotted, the crews have a contingency. A single valve can flood and sink the vessel in minutes, along with all its cargo, leaving no evidence behind. But submarines aren't the cartel's only high-tech tool. Their other weapon? Speed. Enter the go-fast boats, small but deadly. Around 30 feet in length, most are powered by 3 or 4 high-performance engines and can hit speeds over 80 miles per hour. They're built for agility and stealth, hugging the waterline painted to match the sea, and often operated by a single smuggler to maximize space for drugs and fuel. With as much as 2,000 gallons of fuel on board, they can cover over 500 miles, enough to go from Colombia to Jamaica or from the Bahamas to Florida. Now, cartels have gone further, developing hybrids. These low-profile vessels blend the traits of go-fasts and submarines. They cruise just above the waterline, are nearly invisible to radar, and move at slower speeds, about 30 miles per hour. Constructed with radar-absorbing materials, they're the ultimate stealth craft. With subs lurking in the deep and low-slung boats skimming the waves, cartel smuggling has become a game of shadows. Shipments can appear from anywhere, at any time. But there's one ship that's turned that chaos into fear: the USCGC James. In 2025, this Coast Guard cutter has become a legend. During a grueling 112-day patrol, it captured so much cartel cargo that some traffickers won't even speak its name aloud. The James is a 418-foot maritime fortress operated by 150 elite crew members trained in high-speed pursuits and at-sea interdictions. In one mission near Ecuador, it deployed a drone with an 18-hour flight window and ultra-clear cameras to track a suspicious vessel. The result? 3 smugglers arrested and over 2,200 pounds of cocaine confiscated. The day after that bust, surveillance spotted an even bolder move: 3 go-fast boats running together. It's a risky tactic, rarely seen. U.S. forces launched helicopters and intercepted all 3 simultaneously. 9 more traffickers were taken into custody, and another 14,000 pounds of cocaine seized. Cartels responded by switching to radar-evading boats. But once again, the cutter James was ready. A helicopter swooped in, disabled the engines mid-run, and apprehended the crew, along with over 8,000 pounds of drugs. In another chase, smugglers began tossing bales of cocaine into the sea to outrun the Navy. But fast response teams retrieved both the drugs and the culprits, salvaging 6,000 pounds of narcotics from the ocean. In 4 months, the James removed over 48,000 pounds of illegal substances, worth more than $920 million, from cartel hands. enough to cripple trafficking routes for months. Other Navy ships, such as the USS Minneapolis-St. Paul and USS St. Louis, have joined the mission in the Caribbean, helping dismantle the smuggling networks of groups like Sinaloa and CJNG, Jalisco New Generation. To reinforce the effort, the USS Gravely, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer equipped with Tomahawk missiles, was deployed to waters near the Texas-Mexico border, not for show, but for action. It's now coordinating with Border Patrol and Coast Guard units both in U.S. territory and just beyond. And it's not just happening at sea. President Trump is pushing hard to fulfill his long-promised border wall revival. New sections rise 30 feet into the sky, built with steel bollards and fitted with features to prevent climbing. But that's just the surface. Every panel is wired with motion sensors and high-definition surveillance cameras. The moment movement is detected, alerts go out, and the Air National Guard responds. Since Border Patrol agents must be boots on the ground, the National Guard fills the surveillance gap. Upon alert, drones are launched to scout the terrain. If someone is spotted, law enforcement is dispatched within minutes. This shift has made smuggling far more difficult. Under Biden, Border Patrol caught over 7,100 people per day. Under Trump, that number has dropped to about 1,000 daily, a staggering difference. And this is just the beginning. Every branch of the U.S. military is now part of this fight. They've brought in surveillance platforms, fast response units, and drone warfare on a scale never seen in the war on drugs. One surprising comeback? The legendary U-2 spy plane. Despite its age, it remains one of the most powerful aerial intelligence tools ever built. Flying at 70,000 feet, it can capture crystal-clear images from over 300 miles away and map hidden cartel bases, even through dense jungle canopy or mountain ranges. Together with MQ-9 Reapers, U-2s are scanning Mexico's terrain day and night, identifying targets that were once invisible. The message is clear: the United States is no longer waiting. Every eye in the sky, every ship at sea, and every boot on the ground is aimed at one goal: dismantling the cartels once and for all. The battle lines are drawn, the storm is here, and for the cartels, escape is no longer an option. The U.S. Navy is stepping up its game in a big way. Among the latest assets deployed is the P-8 Poseidon, a cutting-edge surveillance aircraft originally engineered to track enemy submarines and warships. Today, it's soaring over the Baja Peninsula, monitoring the Pacific coastline for cartel maritime activity. Its advanced sonar and radar systems are crucial for intercepting drug shipments, especially those aimed at slipping into California. Meanwhile, one of America's most powerful intelligence aircraft, the RC-135 Rivet Joint, has been spotted flying over cartel-controlled zones. Outfitted with sophisticated signal interception gear, this plane can pick up everything, from cell phone chatter and radio frequencies to encrypted communications used by top-level cartel operatives. Every time a trafficker makes a call, sends a signal, or radios a message, the Rivet Joint locks in on it, zeroing in on their exact location. After being seen near Culiacan, a notorious cartel stronghold, it became clear the U.S. Air Force is gathering intel straight from the top of the cartel hierarchy. But what Washington plans to do with that intel is where things take a serious turn. Talks of taking direct military action against cartel networks have floated around for years. But now, it's more than talk. It's nearing reality. According to multiple current and former military, intelligence, and law enforcement sources, President Trump is seriously weighing targeted airstrikes. The plan on the table hit cartel leaders, drug labs, transport hubs, and storage facilities using drones and bombers deep inside Mexican territory. Quiet meetings between Pentagon brass, White House officials, and intelligence chiefs are already underway. And while Mexican authorities have been briefed, cooperation isn't guaranteed. Behind closed doors, there's already chatter that if diplomacy stalls, the U.S. might go solo, launching covert strikes without formal permission from Mexico's government. If that happens, it could mark one of the largest U.S. military actions on foreign land since the early 2000s war on terror. The scope of the proposed mission, the personnel, aircraft, and firepower involved, would dwarf anything the cartels have faced before. When asked about the reports, the National Security Council remained tight-lipped, a silence that only fuels speculation. At the same time, Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has pushed back hard against any idea of unauthorized military involvement. While acknowledging collaboration with U.S. forces, she's made it clear any unsanctioned action would be seen as a breach of sovereignty. That hasn't stopped Ronald Johnson, Trump's pick for U.S. ambassador to Mexico, from endorsing unilateral action if it comes to that. And the U.S. military isn't bluffing. The Pentagon is reportedly prepping the B-2 Spirit, one of the world's most fearsome stealth bombers, for deployment. Originally designed for nuclear warfare, the B-2 is engineered to slip past enemy radar undetected, strike with brutal accuracy, and vanish before anyone knows it was there. The bomber's sleek design isn't just aesthetic. Its curved body and low profile scatter radar waves away from enemy systems, making it nearly invisible even at close range. Its radar signature is about the size of a bird, just 0.1 square meters. But the B-2's invisibility doesn't stop at radar. Its engines are tucked inside the fuselage with specialized exhausts that cool the heat before it escapes, helping it dodge infrared detection from heat-seeking missiles. Covered in a top-secret coating, rumored to include a material called iron ball paint, the B-2 absorbs nearly 80% of radar energy. It was made for night raids, precision strikes, and deep penetration missions with zero warning. Supporting the B-2 in the skies are E-2D Hawkeye radar planes. These aircraft scan enemy airspace and feed encrypted updates directly to the bomber via secure data links, giving the B-2 a real-time 3D battlefield view, all without using its own radar, which could expose its position. This coordination lets the bomber operate in complete radio silence while knowing exactly where everything is, making it ideal for hunting down hidden cartel strongholds. And when it's time to hit hard, the B-2 doesn't hold back. It can carry up to 40,000 pounds of armament, including 2,000-pound JDAM bombs, smaller guided munitions, or even the monstrous 30,000-pound GBU-57 bunker buster, built to obliterate underground targets like fortified cartel tunnels or command centers. These bombs can be dropped from 50,000 feet and fall silently for over 40 seconds, smashing into targets with terrifying force, all while the bomber is already miles away, unreachable and undetected. It also integrates seamlessly into the military's tactical network. It receives mission data from satellites, relays information through secure channels, and communicates using the Link 16 system, allowing it to adapt mid-flight and coordinate with other units in real time. On board, an electronic defense suite constantly scans for enemy radar activity. If it detects a lock-on attempt, it immediately notifies the pilots and suggests evasive action, whether it's changing altitude or adjusting course, to stay under the radar. This level of capability has cartel leaders rattled, because with the B-2 in the air, there's nowhere to hide. Whether it's a jungle lab, a mountain compound, or a hidden bunker in plain sight, the bomber can find it and wipe it out without a trace. And while it can be armed with nuclear warheads like the B-61 or B-83, those weapons remain off the table, at least for now. But make no mistake, these conventional strikes are the most powerful tools the U.S. has short of nuclear arms. And they send a chilling message. The United States is ready to use overwhelming force to dismantle cartel operations no matter where they're hiding. Thanks for watching. If you want to dive deeper into the U.S. military's growing fight against the cartels, click the next video on your screen now. We'll see you there.